Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I am here with my, as always, late card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. Had the idea in the back of my head. I was very literally inspired by the graphic that I showed at the beginning of the video here and that I'll have posted on my blog. That was the inspiration for the color challenge. So I pulled out the Simon Says Stamp Dancing Fruits set, and I'm just using the outline apple image from the set, and I'm stamping it onto some Strathmore Ready Cut Cold Press watercolor paper. And I am using some MFT Hot Fudge, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Hot Fudge hybrid ink. Their hybrid inks are good for watercoloring and whatnot. And it was the only brown hybrid ink that I've got right now in my stash. For some reason I thought I had more, but that's the only one I could find. So I had this little ink cube and I used that just because brown's a little less harsh than black. Every once in a while I remember to pull out a brown ink to experiment with stamping images and that. It's a different look than black. It doesn't seem like it would be, but it is. So I'd stamped that multiple times all over this watercolor paper. And then I taped it down with my painter's tape and actually used up that roll of painter's tape, which I have been using, I think, for a couple years. Like one roll of painter's tape, if you're a card maker like me and, you do a fair bit of watercoloring, will last forever, it seems. So I taped it down, and then I'm just using Distress inks to do my watercolor here, which I have super sped up just because it's a really simple watercolor. I just mushed my little mini ink cubes onto my little Art Impressions plastic palette here. You could use anything that's non-porous, a ceramic plate or just whatever you've got on hand. And then I'm just picking up the color with a water brush and painting it down. I've been getting a lot of comments recently from people saying, like one that really stuck in my mind was, the comment was along the lines of, oh, I'm cheating. I just use Distress inks and not, actual watercolors. Honestly, use whatever you have and whatever you're comfortable with. And definitely, I will not knock Distress inks. I love Distress inks. I think they're awesome. The way they react with water and like coloring with them, the sponging techniques and everything else. Like if you don't have Distress inks, one, get some. And two, when it comes to things like watercolor and that, they're great for it. They work so well with water and you can lay down color and you can add layers and all that. That's what I did here. I did the peeled paint for the leaves, and then I dried it quickly with my heat tool just to speed things up, and then I added a second layer just to kind of deepen the color. Like, you can't go wrong with Distress inks. I know a lot of us paper crafters are really diving into, the professional watercolors. We're getting our Daniel Smith and our Schminke and all this stuff, which, the price one is kind of insane, but it's something we obviously we love. I love collecting watercolor. That's my little thing, and I love using it. And I really do love the high-end brands. They're just, they're amazing. But you don't need them. You can use your Distress inks. I've shown so many other watercolors. I skip back and forth. I'll use a cheaper set one day, a cheap $10 set or couple dollar set, and then the next day I pull out my Mission Golds or my Schminke set. It just is personal preference. And I like to show a lot of variety and the different looks you can achieve with different things. But definitely don't feel like you absolutely have to get everything that I use. I'm a kind of an exception to the case. And when it comes to watercolor, I do like to have it all. I really do. Anyway, that's a total side note on all this watercolor. Like I said, I used just the Distress inks. I'll have the colors listed. I kept this really simple and I just used a water brush. I didn't even use a paintbrush, just a little water brush, and picked up my color. And the apples I layered again. I did my first layer with that Barn Door Distress ink, and then I added a second layer just to deepen it. And then I used some gathered twigs just to fill in the little stems. Then I made sure this was extremely 100% dry before going on to, of course, adding Copic opaque white splatter, because that's what I do. I'd use my water brush for this time just to see if I could. I don't recommend using a water brush for this. One, if you ever do, make sure you clean this out really, really well afterwards. Because it's a water brush, it tends to kind of absorb. And this is acrylic paint, so if it is not cleaned out and you let it dry, you will wreck your water brush. It will clog it up and you're done for. Not that these are super expensive, but still, that's why I prefer just using a cheap little paintbrush to do my splatter. But I was just curious whether or not it would work, and it did. And then I took my water brush to the sink and completely cleaned it out to make sure that there was no, you know, opaque white residue left in that little water brush. So after I did my splatter, I let that completely dry, and then I die cut it with the largest of the Simon Says basic rectangles, which is an A2 size die, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then for my sentiment, I'm using the Kindness Matters wafer die from Simon. And I die cut it with black cardstock, and then with their green leaf cardstock. And then I traced that over some vellum, and I cut down the piece with my scissors. And then I flipped over the black piece, and I added my multimedia matte adhesive and just backed it with the vellum. It's kind of an extra step, but I just liked that'll kind of soften it when I adhere this to my card front and make the actual, you know, openings that say Kindness Matters stand out a bit. And then I added adhesive to the green die cut, and I'm going to adhere it over the black, but I'm going to just slightly offset this so that you can, you know, so basically the black is kind of shadowing the green, and it just gives it that little extra something. And then I ended up adhering the inside to the D on this sentiment, but the other two, the A and the R, I didn't bother. They were like tiny little pieces, and one, I didn't want to fiddle with it, and two, I didn't think it really mattered. But the D I did adhere just so it stood out a little bit more. And then to finish off the sentiment, I ended up sponging that same distress ink I used for the leaves. This is peeled paint distress ink. And I just sponged it around the edges of this cardstock. I just kind of deepened it to make it stand out a little bit more over this fairly busy kind of watercolor background here. So I just used my little mini ink blending tool and sponged that all around the edges. I used to do that all the time. Like, I think every card I used to make way back in the day, every layer of colored cardstock would get ink sponged on the edges. It was just a thing. And now I hardly ever do it. It's kind of funny how things change over the years, or styles change and whatnot. But anyway, after I did that, I adhered my sentiment flat to my card front with more of that multi-medium matte adhesive. And then I just put an acrylic block over it to hold it in place so that it could really adhere well to that watercolor background. And then for my embellishments, I'm using some Studio Caudia little clear droplets. This is actually a Simon Says Stamp exclusive mix. And some of them are so tiny, I just love them. So I had a few of those clear drops, and I also pulled out my Studio Caudia these red iridescent heart jewels that are absolutely fabulous. I've been kind of waiting to use these on a card, like waiting for the opportunity to come up that they would work perfectly with. I used the clear on a previous card and absolutely love them. And these red ones I thought would just be fun with the red of the apples. So I'm adhering those and the clear drops into place with my multimedia matte adhesive again. I'm using my Marvy jewel picker here. I've had people asking about this, like, do I prefer this over the Crystal Katana? Honestly, it depends. Sometimes I really like this jewel picker. Other times, like today, I was really irritated with it. It's too sticky. The price is great, but I sometimes find I get really frustrated with it. So I just picked up the jewels, though, with the jewel picker, used a little dab of the multimedia matte, and then I ended up having to, like, basically pull the jewels off the jewel picker and press them into place. I don't know, and also FYI, I don't have a problem using the multimedia matte with clear embellishments like the clear drops. I know a lot of people prefer using glossy accents, and sometimes I'll use that, but after it dries, even the multimedia matte, I don't find that it leaves a matte finish underneath the clear drops. Like, I'm just looking at it right now, and it seems fine to me. So I went onto the inside of my card, and I stamped a sentiment from the big SCRIPTY greeting set, and then I inked up the apple with that same red barn door ink. And then I had a mask that I used the last time I used this stamp set. I just saved my masks. I keep them, I just stick them right onto the backing sheet of the stamps so that I don't have to cut out a mask again the next time I want to use them. So I masked off the little red apple and then stamped it with that same green, just to give the inside a little something something. And then I'm going to add adhesive to the back of my watercolor piece and adhere that to my card base. And that finished off my card. So I will have a link to my blog post. I'll have a link to links to all the supplies used, etc., etc. That will be in the description box below the video as well as on my blog. So check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I appreciate the support more than you know. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.